Chapter 1. The Bluff. The problem with being the disappointing sister is that eventually the impressive one gets herself stabbed. Not fatally. Katerina Potter didn't do anything as pedestrian as dying. She did, however, manage to take a cursed blade through the shoulder during a border skirmish 3 days before the most important diplomatic mission their pack had seen in a decade, which meant she was currently lying in a healer's ward, not June's, because Katerina didn't trust June's holistic approach, which was a polite way of saying she thought June's magic was glorified aromatherapy. Her left arm bound to her torso with spelled bandages, her face a mask of furious helplessness, and her mouth saying the words June would remember for the rest of her life. "You'll go in my place. You'll be me." June had laughed. Then she'd realized Katerina wasn't laughing. Then she'd sat down, very carefully, on the edge of a chair, because her legs had made an executive decision to stop working. "Katerina, I brew tea. I mend wards. I have the wolf mind, but not the shift, which means I am neither a proper mage nor a proper wolf, which is the exact combination of traits you want in a person pretending to be the most terrifying battle mage on the continent. You look like me. I look like a version of you that got less sleep and more pastry. Close enough." Katerina's jaw tightened, the expression she wore when she was about to explain something obvious to someone she loved but found exasperating, which was her default mode with June. "Listen to me. The Ashford clan has scouts on every road between here and the Blackwood. They know about this mission. They know I'm supposed to go. If they find out I'm down, if there is even a whisper that the ice scythe is wounded and bedridden, they move on our eastern border within the week. Our pack cannot survive that, not without the Blackwood Alliance. So send someone else. Send Commander Graves. Send literally anyone who can do a convincing impression of a terrifying person. No one else looks like me, and the Blackwood court has never met me in person, only heard the stories. They need to see a Potter standing in their great hall radiating menace. You can radiate menace. I radiate anxiety. Those are different things. From a distance, they're indistinguishable." And because June had never once in 26 years won an argument with her sister, because the Ashford clan really would attack and their pack really wasn't ready, she had said yes. She told herself it would be simple. Stand in a hall, look cold, don't talk, go home. She did not account for the alpha king of the Blackwood being the kind of man who left dead animals at your door because he genuinely believed it was welcoming. June stood in the doorway of the guest quarters and felt a single, perfect tear of despair trace a path down her cheek. It wasn't just wrong. It was a masterpiece of wrongness. A fully committed, lavishly executed monument to misguided hospitality that could have been displayed in a museum under the title, Portrait of a Man Who Tried. The sheets were some kind of coarse, scratchy linen that would exfoliate her skin just by looking at it. The pillows were stuffed with what felt like angry geese. The ambient temperature was approximately that of a well-meaning sauna, and someone had, for reasons that defied all available sanity, draped a massive, freshly cured deer pelt over the foot of the bed. It still smelled faintly of forest and effort. "He is trying to cook us," the quiet part of her mind observed, the wolf sense she'd been born with, the animal awareness that tracked comfort and threat and territory with steady, unsentimental precision. June was wolf-blooded. She had the instincts, the heightened senses, the inner voice that thought in images and certainties, but not the shift. She couldn't take wolf form. Among the shifter packs, this made her something between a curiosity and a pity. Among mages, it made her not quite one of them either. She existed in the hyphen between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. "The pelt is for flavor," the wolf sense added. Through the doorway she could see him, Leo Wolfstone, the Alpha King. Her briefing documents had described him as unconventional but effective. They had not mentioned that he was beautiful in the specific way of a man who had no idea he was beautiful, which was the most dangerous kind. He was broad-shouldered, with a mane of dark hair and eyes the color of moss after rain. And he held himself like someone who was genuinely, physically capable of enormous violence, but had decided, as a matter of policy, to use his body primarily for enthusiastic gesturing and occasional furniture-related accidents. Right now he was radiating a frantic, hopeful energy, standing in the corridor with his hands clasped behind his back, watching her face for a reaction. With the intensity of a man who has just cooked his first meal for someone important and is only now realizing he may have set something on fire. He looked so proud. And that was what broke her. The tear was followed by another. She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes. His proud expression crumpled into panic. He rushed forward, stopping a respectful but alarmed 5 feet away. "Is it not to your liking? Is it the pelt? My wolf said it was a good one, a very noble beast. Took me 3 days to track. No, that's not important. We can lose the pelt. Do you need different pelts? Ronan!" A voice from somewhere down the corridor, carrying the specific exhaustion of a man who had been through this before. "If you say more pelts, I am handing in my resignation. Again." "I wasn't going to say more pelts." He was absolutely going to say more pelts, June's wolf sense noted, with the flat certainty of someone who had already assessed the entire situation and found it mildly, predictably exhausting. "No," June said, dropping her hands and managing a wobbly smile. "It's overwhelming. The generosity. That was a word for it. I'm just tired from the journey." Leo's shoulders dropped 6 inches in relief. He was a mountain of a man who somehow managed to look like a chastened schoolboy when his posture changed. "Of course, forgive me. I get enthusiastic about guests. We don't get many." "I can't imagine why," June murmured, and then immediately wanted to die because that was a June thing to say, not a Katerina thing. Katerina would never have been dry. Katerina would have been glacial and silent, and this man would have been terrified instead of looking at her like she'd just said something delightful. His mouth twitched, almost a grin. He caught it, straightened. "The evening meal will be informal. Please rest, Envoy Potter." "Fewer pelts," she said, before she could stop herself. This time the grin broke through. It was devastating. Not because it was charming, it was, but because it was a smile completely without performance. A full wattage expression of genuine, uncomplicated delight that hit her like walking face first into a glass door. She was in so much trouble. He backed away with assurances. The moment the door clicked shut, June sagged against the frame. "The air is soup," her wolf sense observed. "I am going to sleep now. Wake me when the conditions improve, or when we are dead, whichever comes first." "Helpful," June whispered. "Very helpful." That night, June did what she did best. She took control of the only things she could. She found softer linens in a storage chest. She opened a window. She replaced the goose pillows with her own travel pillow. She dismantled the nest of well-intentioned horror and rebuilt it into something livable. Then she did the thing she actually needed to do. She knelt on the floor, placed her palms flat against the wooden boards, and listened. Not with her ears, with the part of her that had always been different. Most healers worked on bodies, flesh, bone, blood. June worked on everything else. She could feel the living pulse of a place, the energy that ran through land and stone and wood, the magic that held wards together and kept ancient things alive. She could mend a cracked ward stone the way a surgeon mended a fracture, by feel, by instinct, by understanding what the thing wanted to be and coaxing it back toward wholeness. It was a rare gift, perhaps unique. She'd been told that once by an old healer in the northern mountains who had held June's hands and turned them over and said, "These hands could heal a forest." June had been 14. She'd gone home and told Katerina, who had said, "That's nice. Can you learn a shielding spell by Tuesday?" Now, kneeling on the floor of a guest room in the Blackwood, June felt the bones of the place. The great hall's foundation hummed with generations of pack energy, warm, layered, alive. But underneath that warmth, something was wrong. The wards protecting this territory were thinning. Not collapsing, thinning, like old cloth worn nearly transparent. She could feel the weak spots, the northern pass, the eastern ridge, the tree line above the falls. It wasn't dramatic. It was the slow, quiet deterioration of something that hadn't been properly tended in years. The northern pass was worst, a hairline fracture in the anchor stone, bleeding energy like a slow leak. It needs a healer, her wolf sense observed. Not a battle mage, not a weapon, a healer. June sat back on her heels. She could fix the northern pass ward in an afternoon. She could heal the whole network, given time, but doing so meant revealing what she was. And revealing what she was meant the Ashford clan would learn Katarina was down, and that meant war on her pack's border. She considered, briefly, suggesting that Katarina recommend an outside healer be brought in. But the idea collapsed under its own weight. What she could do, healing magic itself, healing the land, wasn't ordinary healer's work. Any standard healer they brought in would examine the wards and find damage they couldn't actually fix, which would only confirm the territory's vulnerability. Worse, it would raise the question of why a battle mage of Katarina's caliber was deferring to a healer in the first place. The suggestion itself would crack the disguise. So she sat with her hands in her lap, feeling the wards deteriorate, and hated every second of it. Finally, only the deer pelt remained. She ran a hand over the thick fur, surprisingly soft. She thought of him standing there with his pine and ozone scent and his crumpled expression, and filed the thought under, not useful right now. She folded the pelt, placed it in the storage chest, and crawled into bed. Her last thought was about his scent. Pine, damp earth, ozone. Like a forest after a storm. Quiet for a man who contained that much nervous energy. Pay attention to this one, her wolf sense murmured, already half asleep. She'd worry about it tomorrow. Chapter 2. The Blackwood. The next morning, June awoke to a small, lopsided pile of objects outside her door. It contained a perfectly round riverstone, a half-eaten honeycomb buzzing with a few drowsy bees, and a single, slightly mangled blue feather. She stared at it. It was, she realized with dawning horror, a welcome basket, pack style. Morning, Your, Eminence? A wiry man with tired eyes and hair that had clearly surrendered to entropy approached, holding a wooden tablet. Ronan, the beta. He gestured at the pile. Pack's excited to have you. They express themselves. With things. It's a Blackwood tradition. Everyone gets one. Everyone? June repeated, privately relieved. Not a romantic overture, then. Just the pack equivalent of a fruit basket, if the fruit basket had been assembled by optimistic raccoons. Everyone. When I joined the pack, they left me a fish skeleton and a very aggressive beetle. It took me 3 years to work out that it was affectionate. The stone is acceptable, June's wolf sense noted. The rest is debris. But it is well-intentioned debris. Leave it. She pocketed the stone anyway. The Alpha King is waiting for you in the Great Hall. He's attempting to conduct the morning briefing. Ronan said attempting with the weary resignation of a man who had watched this show many times. The Great Hall was less of a hall, and more of a giant, high-ceilinged log cabin filled with mismatched furniture and a worrying number of antlers. Wolves and humans in various states of dress milled about, talking loudly and occasionally throwing food. It should have been chaos. It was chaos. But it was the specific chaos of a family that was loud because it was comfortable, messy because it was real, and disorganized in the way that only people who fundamentally trust each other can afford to be. She'd expected a court. This was a kitchen table that had gotten magnificently out of hand. Under her feet, through the floorboards, she could feel the energy of the place, warm, layered, profoundly safe. Whatever was wrong with the wards, it wasn't the pack. The pack was healthy. The pack was thriving. Something else was broken. At the head of it all, Leo was trying to look commanding. It was almost working, until a small child toddled up and handed him a turnip with solemn gravity. Leo accepted the turnip with equal solemnity, placing it on the table beside him before continuing his briefing without missing a beat. And the patrol reports from the Eastern Ridge are clear, but I want a double watch tonight. The wards at the Northern Pass have been thinning. His jaw tightened on the word thinning. He knew his wards were failing, and he didn't know why. I want a full assessment before the week is out. Whatever's happening, we fix it before it becomes someone else's talking point. He caught June's eye across the hall. His composure held. He gave her a brief, steady nod and returned to his briefing. She'd expected him to be flustered, based on the pelt panic, but he wasn't. He was, she realized, actually good at this. The chaos wasn't failure. It was the texture of a pack that felt safe enough to be messy, governed by a king who'd decided that a child handing him a turnip during a security briefing was evidence things were working. He runs this place like a family dinner, her wolf sense observed. It is inefficient and loud, and no one is sitting in the correct chair. It is the healthiest pack energy I have ever felt. Then he took a step to the side, and his boot caught the edge of the turnip. He didn't fall, but he performed a spectacular windmilling stumble that sent a stack of maps flying. Parchment rained down on the assembled pack, who mostly just laughed and tried to catch them. Leo's face went the color of a brick. He closed his eyes for a single, soul-deep moment of private suffering, then opened them and continued talking as if nothing had happened. June bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted copper. Katerina would not smile. Katerina would see weakness. June saw a man who had built something genuinely warm and then tripped over the evidence of it, and who had decided, correctly, that acknowledging the turnip would give it power. Ronan sighed. It was a sigh that contained multitudes. He was already gathering the maps. "Envoy Potter," Leo said, a fraction too controlled. "Perhaps you would honor me with a tour of our territory after the meal." "I would be delighted," June managed, her voice a cool, crisp whisper. Inside, she was a catastrophe. Her briefing documents had not mentioned the turnip vulnerability, or the fact that his scent did something structurally unsound to her composure, or that watching him accept root vegetables from toddlers with the gravity of a man receiving a diplomatic communiqué was going to be the thing that broke her. Later that day, Leo led her along a path through the heart of the Blackwood. The forest was ancient, beautiful, sunlight dappling through a thick canopy. Under her feet, the land hummed. She could feel everything: ward anchors that hadn't been reseeded in years, ley line junctions silted up like neglected riverbeds. The territory wasn't dying. It was ailing. Quietly. The way old, strong things ail. Still standing, still functional, but losing resilience with every season. She could fix it. The realization was a physical ache in her hands. But she kept them at her sides and her mouth shut. They walked in comfortable silence. Comfortable was the problem. It was already easy with him, easier than it should have been. He didn't fill space with noise the way most people did. He pointed out landmarks, an ancient oak split by lightning, a creek where the otters had declared an independent republic. And when June asked a question, he listened to the whole thing before answering. This was rare in her experience. Most people heard the first 3 words and started composing their response. Leo heard the last word and then thought about it. It made her want to tell him things. True things. Dangerous things. Then he stopped abruptly, bent down, and picked up a flat gray stone from the path. He brushed it off on his trousers, then held it out to her. It was a completely unremarkable rock. "A stone," he said, as if presenting the crown jewels. "For you, it's, geologically significant." June stared at it. Her mind, a finely tuned machine for anxiety and overthinking, went into immediate, spectacular overdrive. What is the protocol for receiving a geologically insignificant rock from an Alpha King? Katerina would probably use it to kill someone. But I don't know how to kill someone with a rock, and if I try, I will probably just hurt my hand, and that would be the single most pathetic thing that has ever happened to a potter. Which is saying something, because Katerina once accidentally set her own cloak on fire during a formal dinner. It is a rock, her wolf sense interrupted. You could throw it. He looks like the kind who would enjoy chasing things. She took the rock. Her fingers brushed his, warm, brief, and when she looked up, his green eyes held something she wasn't prepared for. Not romance. Something simpler and more disarming. The look of a man who had just done something slightly ridiculous and was fully aware of it and was choosing to be vulnerable about it anyway. Thank you, she said, and her voice was her own, not Katerina's. Warm, a little startled. It's very solid. He looked so relieved he might have floated away. She clutched the rock and thought, I am impersonating a weapon of mass destruction, and I just thanked the Alpha King for a pebble in my real voice. Katerina is going to rise from her healer's bed on one working arm, and she is going to end me. If she kills you, her wolf sense offered, I would like it noted that I died well rested. This is more than most wolves can say. Chapter 3. The Friendship. Fire crackling, voices, distant laughter. The next few days were when the friendship, the real, inconvenient, unplanned thing that was going to ruin everything, took root. It wasn't dramatic. It was 100 small moments. Leo, she discovered, was lonely in the specific way of a man surrounded by people who loved him, but didn't quite understand him. He'd inherited a kingdom built on fear and rebuilt it on warmth, and the cost of that transformation was that no one in his inner circle fully believed it was working. Ronan was loyal, but skeptical. The pack was happy, but unsettled by the dimming sunstone. The old guard whispered that his father would have been stronger. June, who had spent her entire life being the wrong kind of potter in rooms full of people who wished she were a different kind, recognized the loneliness immediately. It had a specific scent, the smell of someone laughing loudly so no one notices the silence underneath. She couldn't help him as Katerina, but she couldn't help responding as June. It happened in fragments. During the evening meals, chaotic, loud, food occasionally airborne, she'd catch his eye across the table and raise one eyebrow a fraction, a silent commentary on whatever absurdity had just occurred, and his face would do the thing, the brief, startled, almost grin of a man who wasn't used to being read. She'd offer an observation about the pack's dynamics, framed carefully, clinically, as a strategic assessment, but really just the truth as she saw it, and he'd go still, the way he did when someone said something he needed to hear. Your wolves are happy, she told him one evening, standing at the edge of the great hall while the pack held an impromptu wrestling tournament that appeared to have no rules and at least 3 simultaneous winners. Not disciplined, not afraid. Happy. That's harder to build and harder to break. He'd looked at her with an expression she didn't have a name for. Not gratitude exactly, more like recognition. The look of a man being told for the first time that the thing he'd chosen to build was real. He started finding reasons to be near her. Not in a pursuing way, there was nothing predatory or romantic about it. He was just present. He'd appear at the door of the great hall when she was studying Katerina's incomprehensible books, still upside down half the time, and ask if she wanted to walk. They'd walk. He'd talk about his father, about the pack's history, about the specific headache of trying to convince a centuries-old territory that joy was not a sign of weakness. She'd listen, and then she'd say something that cut to the center of it, and he'd go quiet in the way that meant she'd been heard. She was the only person in his life who didn't need him to explain himself. She just saw it. And for a man who had spent years explaining and justifying and defending his every choice, being seen without having to perform was like putting down a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. The gifts continued, not romantic offerings, just Leo's wolf instinct expressing, this person is important, through increasingly unhinged acts of generosity. After the rock came a perfectly dead pheasant, its tail feathers fanned out in what she suspected was meant to be an artistic display. Then a meticulously constructed and entirely empty beehive. Then a collection of pine cones arranged in a spiral whose mathematical precision suggested either artistic commitment or a specific kind of mania. Then, in a moment of true inspiration, the left boot of his beta. Ronan. June found Ronan hopping outside her door the next morning with concentrated fury. "He took it while I was sleeping," Ronan said, balanced on one foot with rapidly eroding dignity. "From my foot. The man is the Alpha King, and he removed my boot like a common footpad." "Why would he give me your boot?" "Because his wolf brain has decided you are pack important. And at 3 a.m, when a king is wandering his own halls looking for gift-worthy items and has already exhausted the local supply of dead birds, his beta's footwear apparently qualifies." Ronan pinched the bridge of his nose. "I have spoken to him about boundaries. I have drawn diagrams. It went about as well as you'd expect." "How well is that?" "He nodded very seriously throughout my entire presentation, and then gave you the diagrams. They're in your gift pile under the pine cones." June looked. They were. "He gave us the diagrams about not giving us things," her wolf sense observed. "As a gift." "He is either an idiot or a genius. I am going back to sleep." By night, June knelt on the floor of her guest room with her palms on the boards and felt the failing wards. Every night, the map grew clearer. The northern pass fracture, the silted ley junctions, the slow bleed. She could fix all of it, an afternoon for the northern pass, a week for the full network. Her hands ached with the need to do the work they were made for. But she was Katerina, and Katerina would never kneel on a floor and listen to the land. So June sat with the knowledge and the frustration and the growing, terrible understanding that the thing this territory needed most was the thing she'd spent her life being told wasn't enough. "You are a healer who can heal the world itself," her wolf sense said one night with unusual directness. "And you are pretending to be a woman who sets things on fire. This is not sustainable." "Nothing about this is sustainable," June whispered to the ceiling. The deer pelt, which she had definitely not taken out of the storage chest and draped over her shoulders, pulled tight around her. "The wards are failing, the disguise is cracking, and I am becoming friends with the Alpha King, which is the single most irresponsible thing I have ever done, and I once accidentally cured a goat of depression." The goat was grateful. "The goat followed me home, for 3 weeks. It was a good goat." The friendship was the thing she hadn't planned for, and it was the thing that made everything worse. Because the closer she got to Leo, the more she saw the weight he carried, the dimming sunstone, the whispered doubts, the constant, exhausting work of leading through warmth in a world that equated warmth with weakness. One evening, walking back from the falls, he said something that lodged in her chest like a splinter. "My father would have had the wards fixed by now. He'd have poured raw power into them until they held, and anyone who questioned his method would have been too afraid to say it twice." He paused. "I can't do that. I don't want to do that. But sometimes I wonder if I don't want to is just a dressed-up version of I can't." June opened her mouth to say something comforting and strategic and Katerina-like, and what came out instead was, "That's the stupidest thing you've ever said, and you once told me a rock was geologically significant." He blinked. She pressed on, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic neutrality, because the wolf sense part of her had heard the pain underneath his words, and the June part of her was incapable of letting someone she cared about believe a lie about themselves. "Your wards aren't failing because you're not your father. They're failing because..." She caught herself. "Because they're injured, not weak, and they need a healer, and I am right here." She swallowed the truth like broken glass. "Because ward systems are complex, And brute force is a temporary fix, not a solution. You're looking for a different answer. That's not weakness, that's intelligence. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "You're the only person who talks to me like that." "Like what?" "Like you think I'm worth arguing with." The words hit her in a place she wasn't expecting. She recognized the wound because it was her own wound, seen from the other side. The exhaustion of being chronically underestimated by the people closest to you. His pack loved him. They just didn't fully trust his way yet. And that gap between being loved and being believed in was the loneliest place in the world. She knew. She lived there. She should have changed the subject. Instead, she said, "You are the most exasperating, turnip-tripping, boot-stealing man I have ever met. And you have built the healthiest, most functional pack I have ever seen. Those two things are related. If you can't see that, you need better advisors. I have Ronan." Ronan is currently filing an incident report about his missing boot. Fair point. They stood in the fading light, and something shifted between them. Not dramatically, not with a kiss or a confession or a moment of charged eye contact. Just a quiet click, like a key turning in a lock, the almost inaudible sound of two people who had been carefully keeping their distance, deciding, simultaneously and without discussion, to stop. Chapter 4. The Fracture. Wolves sparring at distance, impact sounds, open air clearing ambience. One afternoon, Leo invited her to observe a training exercise. "A chance to see how the Blackwood wolves work," he said, his tone casual. Too casual. June could smell the shift in him, the ozone note sharpening. Something was different today. She'd felt him watching her for days. Small moments where her reactions didn't match Katerina's profile. Hesitations. The wrong kind of knowledge in her observations. The dry humor that kept slipping through. He'd been cataloging discrepancies. And the part of him that was king before anything else needed resolution. The training field was a wide clearing, ringed by birch trees. A dozen wolves ran drills, coordinated formations, rapid shifts, defensive maneuvers. They were good. Under her feet, the earth hummed with trust energy. Leo turned to her. "Your sister's technique at the siege of Coldwater Creek, the channeled barrier she held for 6 hours. My wolves had been trying to adapt something similar for our ward rotations. Could you demonstrate the foundational form? Just the stance and the initial channel?" It was a reasonable question. The kind of thing an ally would ask and a battle mage would answer. It came up naturally, embedded in a real training session, surrounded by wolves doing real work. It wasn't staged as a public spectacle. It was just a moment, in context, where a truth would either hold or it wouldn't. That was what made it smart. And what made it devastating. June's blood went cold. "We have been cornered," her wolf sense stated. Politely, plausibly, but cornered. She could feel the weight of his gaze, patient, steady, and underneath, she saw it now, sad. He didn't want her to fail. He was hoping she would prove him wrong. She lifted her hands. They were trembling. She tried to remember anything from Katerina's books. Any gesture, any stance, any shape that would look like the beginning of something powerful instead of what it actually was. A wolf-blooded healer's hands shaking in the afternoon light. Nothing happened. No energy gathered, no channel opened. The air remained still. The wolves on the training field had stopped. Ronan, standing at the edge, closed his eyes. And then one of the young wolves on the field yelped. A training partner had clipped him badly. He hit the ground hard, his foreleg twisting with a wet, grinding sound that made June's healer brain override everything. She heard the fracture, compound, bone pressing outward, and every ounce of focus snapped away from the performance and toward the pain. She didn't think. She dropped the useless stance and ran. She was on her knees beside the young wolf before anyone else moved. Whimpering, swelling fast, bone threatening to pierce skin, Her hands found the break by instinct, by feel, by the part of her that understood damage the way musicians understand dissonance. "Hush," she murmured, her voice losing every trace of Katerina's ice. Warm, low, absolutely sure. "I've got you. Hold still." She let her magic go. It came out like a held breath, a soft golden light that bloomed from her palms and sank into the fracture. It smelled of honey and summer rain and something green, something that belonged to growing things. It found the broken edges of bone and aligned them. It found the torn muscle and knit it. It drew the swelling down with patience and precision and the specific, unhurried confidence of someone doing the thing they were made to do. The whimpering stopped. The leg straightened. The young wolf tested it, then shoved his entire head against June's chest with enough force to knock her backward into the dirt. She laughed, real, startled, full, sitting in the dirt with wolf slobber on her tunic, and her cover comprehensively destroyed, and the golden warmth still fading from her fingers. Then she looked up and met Leo's eyes. He hadn't moved. His face held two things at once, clear as text: the relief because the wolf was healed, and the other thing, the quiet devastation of a man watching something he wanted to be untrue become true. He knew. She stood slowly. She watched his face change, the softness draining, replaced by something harder. His jaw set, his shoulders went rigid. "Ronan," he said without looking away from her, "clear the field." He didn't shout. That was worse. They stood in his study, a warm, cluttered room full of books and maps and a truly unnecessary number of carved wooden wolves, including one wearing a tiny knitted crown, and he paced. 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. "How long?" "Since the beginning." "And Katerina?" "Cursed blade. Shoulder. She's alive, but if the Ashford clan finds out she's down, they attack our eastern border. My pack can't survive that without the Blackwood Alliance. So they sent me. They sent a healer. They sent the sister who looks like Katerina. That's all I was supposed to be, a face in a hall. But that's not what happened." "No." He stopped pacing. "You sat in my hall for days. You let me talk about wards and defenses. You nodded. You said, 'I see.' And the entire time, I understood more than you think. I just understood it from the wrong direction. You let me talk to you like you were—" He stopped. "Not a battle mage. Something else. Something closer to the bone. Like you were someone I could trust." The word trust landed like a blade. Because he wasn't talking about the diplomatic deception. He was talking about the evenings, the walks, the conversations where he'd shown her the weight he carried, and she'd said the thing he needed to hear. He was talking about the friendship. "I wasn't pretending about that," she said, and her voice cracked. "How would I know? How would I know what was real? You walked in wearing your sister's name. Everything I thought I knew about you started with a lie. So when you told me my pack was healthy, when you told me I was worth arguing with, was that June or was that Katerina?" "That was me. That was always me." "And which one are you?" The question hit the wound directly. "I'm the one who can't shift," she said, her voice flat. "I'm wolf-blooded, but I can't take the form. I'm a mage, but not the right kind. I'm a healer in a world that wants weapons. I'm the other Potter. The quiet one. The one Katerina sent because she didn't think the truth of who I am was worth anything on its own." The confession hung in the air. She watched him hear it, really hear it, past his own anger. His expression shifted towards something that looked like the beginning of understanding. And then her wolf sense surfaced what she'd been refusing to look at. "The training exercise," she said. Her voice went flat. "The foundational form. June, You already knew. You'd been watching me. You saw the cracks. And instead of pulling me aside, instead of asking me, during any one of the 100 moments when it was just the two of us, when I thought we were actually talking to each other, you embedded a test in a training session and watched me walk into it. I needed to know. You could have asked. You, the man who gives people rocks, who built a kingdom on the idea that people deserve honesty instead of fear. You had 100 chances to just look at me and say, "Who are you, really?" But you didn't. You tested me. And I know it wasn't staged. I know it came up naturally. But you let it happen, Leo. You saw the moment and you used it. And you sat back and watched me fail. The accusation hit. She saw the flinch. The recognition. "You're right," he said after a long silence. "I should have asked. I was afraid that if I asked and you told me the truth, I'd have to act on it, and He stopped. "I didn't want to lose the only person who's ever made me feel like the way I do things isn't wrong." The honesty of it was worse than any anger, because she understood it, because she'd done the same thing from the other side. Maintained a lie to preserve the only real connection she'd ever had. "Well," she said, her voice cracking, "now you have the truth." She walked out before either of them could say anything else. Chapter 5. The Sunstone. She packed. Of course she packed. That was the June Potter response to catastrophe. Fold things neatly, organize the disaster into manageable parcels, leave before anyone has to ask you to go. Her hands moved mechanically, tunic folded. Katerina's useless, beautiful, incomprehensible books, stacked. Travel pillow, compressed. The collection of rocks, pine cones, Ronan's diagrams, and one mangled blue feather she left on the desk. Evidence of something that had almost been real. The deer pelt she left in the storage chest. She stood with her hand on the lid for a long time. "You are running," her wolf sense observed. "You always run. From Katerina, from the pack, from anything that requires you to stand still and be seen for what you are. Being seen is what just happened. Being caught is what happened. Being seen is what you're afraid of. They are not the same thing." She sat on the bed. Through the window, laughter, an argument about firewood, a wolf howling in the forest. The sounds of a place, a home. She could still feel the wards, the fracture in the northern pass, the silted ley lines, the Sunstone's dim, struggling pulse. The whole territory, ailing, waiting for hands that could help. Her hands. She thought about Leo's face when she'd healed the young wolf. Not the after. Not the hurt, the during, the 3 seconds of pure, unguarded wonder when he'd watched her hands glow gold. He'd looked at her magic the way she'd looked at his chaotic court, like something he hadn't known he'd been missing. She pulled the rock from her pocket, the first one, the geologically insignificant one, warm from her body heat, smooth under her thumb. You could throw it, or you could go back. June put the rock in her pocket. She stood. She did not pick up her bag. Wind over stone, distant valley sounds, faint crystalline hum of the Sunstone. She found him at the Sunstone, dusk. The great stone, a monolith of granite and quartz on a rocky crest, caught the last light and held it dimly. Its glow was thin, sickly. Up close, June could feel everything. The stone wasn't failing from lack of power. The entire ward network was injured, untended, bleeding energy through a dozen tiny wounds. The Sunstone was trying to power a broken circuit and exhausting itself. Leo sat on the ground in front of it, his back against the plinth, his head tipped back against cold quartz. He looked like a man who had been sitting there a while and intended to keep sitting there until something made sense. She sat down next to him, not close, but not far. Silence. The forest settled around them. His scent had shifted from lightning back to something tired and sad. Rain on cold stone. "It's been getting dimmer since my father died," he said, not looking at her. He was a traditional alpha, ruled by fear, and the Sunstone burned bright for him, Because fear is a kind of energy. When I took over, I decided I wasn't going to be him. Connection instead of compliance, even if it meant chaos. He paused. The stone's been dimming ever since. My father's old advisors said it proved my way was weak, that warmth wasn't enough. You tested me, she said quietly, because you needed to know if the help was real. Because if it wasn't, if the one person who told you your way was working was a fraud, then maybe you're fooling yourself. Maybe the stone is right about you. His green eyes were raw. Yes. And I lied, because I've spent my whole life believing the truth of who I am isn't valuable enough to offer. Wolf-blooded, but no shift. Mage, but the wrong kind. Healer in a world that wants weapons. She paused. We are two sides of the same counterfeit coin. The ghost of a smile. That's a good line. I've been workshopping it for the last hour. While packing? While unpacking, actually. He looked at her, really looked, without the hurt, with something cautious and new. You stayed. I stayed. She held up the rock. You gave me a geologically significant rock. It felt rude to leave without returning it. Keep it. It's a good rock. It is a completely unremarkable rock, Leo. It's the thought that counts. Her own words from the first night. Something cracked open in her chest, not painfully, like a window in a room that had been closed too long. Your sunstone, she said, looking at the dim monolith. It's not weak, it's sick. The whole ward network is injured. Hairline fractures in the anchor stones, silted ley junctions, energy bleeding out through wounds that have never been tended. Your father powered through it with brute force. It worked the way a fever works. It kept the system running hot, but it masked the underlying damage. When you stopped feeding it fear, the damage became visible. It was always there. He just refused to feel it. Leo stared at her. How do you know that? Because I've been feeling it since the night I arrived. Every night. Palms on the floor, mapping every crack and failing anchor in your territory. Because that's what I do. I don't destroy things, and I can't shift, and I can't hold a channeled form for 6 minutes. But I can feel what's broken in the land itself, in the magic itself. And I can heal it. Not just bodies. Wards, ley lines, anchor stones. The living structure of a territory. I can heal your sunstone. I can heal all of it. I could have done it from the first night, and I've been sitting in my room with my hands in my lap doing nothing because I was too busy pretending to be someone who sets things on fire. Leo stood and offered his hand. Show me. She took his hand. His grip was warm and solid and slightly too tight, nervous and letting her see it. She walked to the sunstone and placed her palms flat against its cold surface. She could feel the exhaustion in it, the stone equivalent of a heart beating too hard against a broken system. Every fracture, every wound, every silted channel. She closed her eyes. She didn't reach for power. She reached for the thing she'd always had, the gentle, sustaining warmth that lived in her hands, the thing she'd spent years apologizing for. She let it go. The golden light bloomed from her palms, sinking into the stone. But this time, she didn't just heal a single fracture. She followed the network, down through the plinth, into the bedrock, along the ley lines that branched through the territory like the roots of an enormous tree. She found the hairline fracture at the northern pass and sealed it. She found the silted junctions and cleared them, one by one, gently, the way you'd clear debris from a stream, letting the flow reestablish itself. She found the years of neglect, the accumulated damage of a territory that had been powered by fear instead of tended with care, and she healed it, all of it. It smelled of honey and summer rain and wood smoke. It smelled of this place, the pack house, the great hall, the laughter and the thrown food and the turnips. The real energy of the Blackwood, not dominance, not fear, but the deep, stubborn, unspectacular warmth of people who had chosen to trust each other. The sunstone shuddered. Then it began to glow, not the cold, hard light of fear, Something warmer, a deep, steady amber that built and built, climbing from a flicker to a blaze, spilling down the hillside, finding the healed wards and feeding them, setting the anchor stones humming. The whole network came alive, not with brute force, but with the quiet strength of a system that was finally, for the first time in years, whole. In the great hall, wolves looked up as golden light flooded through the windows. Ronan, halfway through a spreadsheet about pelt depreciation, blinked and set down his charcoal. The sunstone blazed, brighter than it had been in a generation, brighter than Leo's father had ever made it burn. Because fear was loud, but it wasn't sustainable, and what June was giving it was the opposite of fear, the specific, unglamorous, painstaking magic of someone who healed things. Not spectacularly, not with a single dramatic gesture, but thoroughly and with care, and all the way down to the roots. June pulled her hands away, trembling, spent, vision swimming. She felt Leo's arm around her waist, solid, warm, and she leaned into him because gravity and exhaustion demanded it. "You," he said, his voice very quiet, very rough, "are not your sister." "No," she agreed, leaning against his chest. "I'm the one with the tea recipes and the ability to heal an entire ward network in one session, which I think we can agree is at least slightly more useful than freezing lava." He laughed, short, shaken, incredulous, felt in his chest before she heard it. "Slightly. The large one is holding us," her wolf sense observed, from very far away, with something that sounded like satisfaction. "This is acceptable. He is warm. He smells like the place where the good naps are. I have decided to keep him." "We can't keep people," June murmured. "Watch me." Chapter 6. The Healer's Bluff. Distant Pack Voider. The first thing June had done after the wards were healed was send word to Katerina through a back route Ronan maintained for sensitive communications. The message was brief. Alliance secured. Wards healed. Cover is blown. You should know the Ashford deterrent has changed shape. The Blackwoods' backing is real now, and their territory is stronger than it's been in decades. If the Ashfords want to test it, they are welcome to try. Katerina's reply 3 days later was even briefer. "You healed their entire ward network? Alone? We need to talk about your definition of glorified aromatherapy." June was sitting on the porch of the Alpha King's house, her legs tangled with Leo's. Her head rested on his shoulder, and she was watching Ronan try to explain a color-coded inventory system to a pack member attempting to pay for something in jam. She'd spent the first month healing the territory's ward network, stone by stone, junction by junction. The second month, she'd started teaching. 2 of the Blackwoods' younger wolves showed an aptitude for healing magic, and June had discovered, with some surprise, that she was a good teacher, patient, clear, the kind of teacher who could look at a struggling student and say the thing that made it click, because she knew what it felt like to struggle with a gift the world didn't value. The gift piles still appeared at the entrance of her clinic, still mostly useless, pine cones, interesting sticks, the occasional stolen article of Ronan's clothing. She kept every single one, displayed on a shelf like a museum of well-intentioned debris. The deer pelt was draped over the back of the bench they sat on, worn soft with use. The shift from friends to this, whatever this was, this easy physical closeness that had arrived without announcement or negotiation, had happened so gradually she couldn't have pointed to the moment. One evening he'd sat next to her on this bench, closer than usual, and she hadn't moved away. The next evening, she'd leaned into him, and he'd put his arm around her, and neither of them had said anything about it, because naming it felt less important than the fact of it. "You know," she said, poking him in the ribs, "I never actually liked that pelt." He grinned, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Liar. Ronan told me you took it out of the storage chest on the second night." "Ronan is a traitor, and I'm revoking his inventory privileges." "You can't. He's the only one who can read the spreadsheets." "I will heal his spreadsheets. I will lay my hands on them and they will become legible." "That's not how healing works." "You don't know that. Nobody knows the limits of my power. I healed your entire ward network in one session. For all you know, I can heal a man's penmanship." He laughed, a full, easy sound. His arm tightened around her. "I'm glad you're not a battle mage," he said softly. "I don't think my heart could have survived a competent mate." "Excuse me, I am extremely competent. I brewed a tea last week that cured Ronan's existential despair." It was chamomile. It was a proprietary blend of chamomile, and he stopped threatening to quit for 48 hours, which is a record, and I will not have my life's work diminished by a man who thinks a dead pheasant is a romantic gesture. The pheasant wasn't a romantic gesture, it was a hospitality gesture. My wolf brain doesn't know the difference. Your wolf brain stole a man's boot. The boot was a sign of respect. The boot was a cry for help. He pulled her back against him, laughing, and she let him, because the thing about Leo Wolfstone was that his arms felt like the safest place she'd ever been, and she had spent enough of her life pretending that the things she needed were things she didn't want. He is still clumsy, her wolf sense observed from its customary sunbeam, with something permanent and unmistakable. He tripped over a child this morning. But the wards are strong, the air is no longer soup. The naps here are excellent. I have no complaints. The sunstone, visible on its crest in the distance, glowed steady and warm, not because it had a battle mage's power feeding it, but because it had something better, something messier, something that smelled like honey and rain and a pack that was finally, fully healed. The rock, the first one, the geologically insignificant one, sat on June's nightstand, next to a collection of pine cones and a mangled blue feather, and Ronan's diagrams about boundaries. It was a completely unremarkable rock. It was the best thing anyone had ever given her.